Hey church, welcome back to More Than That. I have sitting next to me Paul's dad, Mark Cary.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to preface it with Paul in terms of Paul's greater than his father, but most of us seem to know Paul a little bit.
I hold him in high regard, so it's
yeah.
I don't mind.
We got Mark Cary next to us, and you had the end of chapter 4 for your sermon topic sermon passage this week, and this is the first time that you've had the pulpit here at City Church. So for us it was a new face, which is always fun. I love getting new faces in the pulpit, just to see and hear their different ways of tackling a passage, and knowing you and your love for chiasms. I was kind of waiting for a chiasm. I didn't. Maybe you saw one that I didn't. But I'm looking forward to seeing if you go there. But because this was your first time here at City Church at the pulpit, could you just introduce yourself a little bit, give us a little bit of maybe your story and how maybe you came to Christ, or kind of how you got to Williamsport? Because I know you got some family in the area, but there's some other things that you've done in your life that are really cool, and I think that's worth just sharing.
Okay, yeah. So born in Houston, Texas.
Okay.
And grew up, as much as I did grow up, in the Southwest, and I grew up in I guess you'd say a broken family or a dysfunctional family. It wasn't working really well. I referred to it in the message of the way we did conflict resolution and such. My parents divorced when I was 11 or 12, and they weren't friends afterwards. And I didn't deal with that well. In fact, within a couple of years, I started smoking marijuana and found great relief. Like, instead of being angry or uptight or all the things that I was going through that I couldn't have articulated at that age, I could tell that I was having fun and laughing and all that stuff. And so I never really just used. I abused from the first.
From day one, yeah.
Yeah, from day one. And after about 4 years, I realized I had a problem, and abused for another 2 years after that. So about 6 years of drug abuse. And when I asked Christ into my life, I was looking for salvation in this life, not thinking about heaven.
Yeah.
And I knew about eternal life and all that. I had heard the gospel growing up, but I needed immediate help. And in His mercy, I was converted. And in fact, yesterday was my spiritual anniversary.
Wow.
July 28, 1979. I was 19 years old. You can figure out how old I am. And it was significant because I had been through drug cycles and rehab and all that sort of stuff, and had never been able to break free.
Yeah.
But on that day, when I asked Christ into my life, I knew enough to know that if I asked Him into my life, I was going to have to follow Him and His way, and I knew my way ended in death. So I did my best to follow Him, I think it'd be fair to say. And I never abused drugs again. I never used drugs again recreationally. If I go to the doctor and he prescribed something for a sore tooth or whatever. But He delivered me from that. And, I would say sexual immorality was another area where I got comfort and enjoyment and this sort of thing. And it was kind of an addiction too. And God delivered me from acting on sexual immorality. I still have to keep a tight rein on my heart and say, But those were huge things.
Yeah.
And I was taught how to read the Bible, how to pray, how to lead someone to Christ, how to lead a Bible study, those sorts of things. And I would say that learning to read the scriptures and just ask the simple who, what, when, why, where questions. What does it mean? What is it? And so what? How do I apply it?
Yeah.
that was not only powerful in life transformation and following Jesus Christ, but healing to my drug-abused brains. Like, when I was converted, I could not write a legible paragraph.
Oh, wow.
And I could barely speak a legible paragraph. Like, I was stuttering, and the other physical effects of drugs had just really messed me up. And I would say memorizing, studying, reading daily, soaking in the scriptures is what God used to do some significant healing in that area.
Yeah. So you mentioned in the sermon how there was like just kind of this part of you and this aspect of you that was kind of seemed like angry. Was that kind of part of, like, as you're obviously continually healing? I mean, drug addiction is one of those things where you're always continuously fighting against and things like that, or at least that's how the professionals are like it. This is more or less, quote unquote, a disease that you have to continually fight. So was that kind of like stemming from that anger and all of that stuff, and obviously with the dysfunctional family that you mentioned, was that kind of stemming from there, the anger and all of that, or was that just kind of more of how you were brought up?
I'm not sure exactly how to answer that question.
That's okay.
I would say theologically, and I could have brought this out better in the sermon. This passage is talking about how we fell into sin, and we may be familiar with the doctrine of total depravity, that sin has impacted every aspect of our life, and so I come by it naturally. Okay. Dave Pallison passed away a couple of years ago. He was a counselor at CCEF, just a brilliant mind. Wrote a book called Good and Angry. And the second chapter of that book is my favorite chapter. His style in that book is to, write the chapter and then have discussion questions after it, right?
Yeah, those are my favorite kind of books.
Yeah, so the title is, Does Everyone Have a Problem with Anger? And the chapter reads, Yes. And then it goes right to discussion questions.
That's awesome. Those are my favorite chapters as well. It's like, they're so short.
Yeah. So yeah, this guy he counseled tons of people. Yeah. He said that, I think, from a theological foundation as well as a practical experience kind of thing.
Yeah. And it's nice too to have, just thinking about it, there's from the highly intellectual people like a counselor or theologian, philosopher, whatever scientist, doesn't really matter. Sometimes they tend to lose their sense of humor. And that's a perfect combination of the intellect and sense of humor, where does everyone have a problem with anger? Yes. Okay, let's move on.
Yeah. So let's talk about it. And it's a great book. I highly recommend it. And I would just say, though, in my pastoral experience, because I was ordained in the Presbyterian Church in America in 1990 and spent most of my time as a pastor, and then just the last 5 years as a missionary. But anger is a problem, and in broken families, it's almost a given that you have a ton of anger to work through, whether you're the one suing for the divorce or the one being divorced or the child of divorce. All different. You're coming at it from different points of view, but you got it.
I know what that's like. But yeah, so before we hop into it, you mentioned you were in the Southwest. Was that like Southern California and like Arizona and New Mexico, or was that more of just like the western side of Texas? Because I know that's also got a more of a southwestern type of feel as well. Just because you mentioned with smoking marijuana, whenever you said that, I was like, oh, he's definitely from like Southern California. Like, definitely
Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Okay.
But I New Mexico and Colorado
Okay.
Were those formative growing up years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's get to the fun stuff.
Okay.
Not that your story is not fun. It was very intriguing. Just and I'd very much like to hear more about like what your experience was with being a child of divorced parents, and because that's kind of my story as well. I was a little bit older than you were, but you had the passage. There's broken families here in the passage, with Cain being basically exiled, and then he's just getting through some of his lineage. So if there was an extra 10 minutes or so that you had to give us something else on Sunday, or maybe dive a little bit deeper into something that you already brought up, what would you have said?
Yes. I think I would have tried to be a little clearer that this fall impacts all of us. So we have this line of Seth to Cain, and then we have Eve and her statement of faith, God has given me a child, and Seth's son Enosh, and then people began to call on the name of the Lord. And interestingly, in the Hebrew, it's just then call on the name of the Lord. There's no people, there's no he, there's no antecedent for us to do that. But anyway, you could say, okay, well, there's a godly line and there's an ungodly line, and I would like to point out that Moses was probably a murderer. You could debate. He was saving Israel from Egypt when he killed the Egyptian, but whatever. And he had
he acted out of anger.
Yeah, and on more than one occasion, it cost him dearly. And I think he probably had more than one wife. It could have been serial, but there was some pushback about Cushite wife and this sort of stuff. And certainly by the time of David, he was a murderer and polygamist. And he's clearly in the line of Christ. So that goes back to total depravity, and that we all struggle. There's no holy line that doesn't sin. And so all of us who call on the name of the Lord need to be able to put to death the sinful nature as part of our walking with the Lord.
Yeah, and I think that that's very important. One of my favorite things to talk about anytime we talk about like Bible reading and interpretation is the question: is this prescriptive or descriptive? And if we're going to look at the line of David and going all the way back to Moses and Cain and Abel and all of that stuff, is the Bible describing what actually happened, or is it prescribing what to do as a Christian? And I think that David's polygamy, Cain's polygamy, and then Lamech's polygamy, and then the potential of Moses and his polygamy. So like all of that stuff tends to be more on the descriptive side. Is like, here's just what's going on. Here's the reality of the situation. But that just because this is the reality of the situation doesn't mean that God can't use it for his purposes.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that our sinful nature keeps God from using us in ministry.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes he uses some of the most broken people for the most amazing things. Like you mentioned in your story how like as soon as you got saved, like it was almost like a cold turkey switch went on. I don't need to do this anymore. Is that kind of what it was?
Well, I mentioned the two big ones, drugs and sex.
And you said you never used after that point,
right?
And it reminds me of I'm a metalhead. So I love heavy metal, love all of that stuff. So last week was kind of a sad week for me with Ozzy's death. But it was another, coming off of your story, it reminded me of Brian Welsh of Korn.
Okay.
Kind of the same thing. Like he was into very, very hard drugs. He was into meth and everything like that. One day he walked into a church high out of his mind. and then was like, God, if you're real, take these drugs away from me, because if I do, then I'm not going to be here for my daughter, and that itself is going to destroy me more than the drugs will. And when he went home, still high out of his mind, tossed him down the toilet and never touched him again. That type of transformative power, and using someone that's so broken, that is basically in rock bottom, and then reaching down, grabbing them and pulling them out. It's those type of stories that, like, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about, like, your story and Brian's, and how they're so much alike in that aspect. And we see that with Moses, and we see that with David, and all of these other people in the grand scheme of the Bible, where God's taking them and pulling them out and saying, I have something bigger and better for you, because you are instrumental in bringing about the Son. So very, very cool, just to kind of like see and kind of like talk with you about, you know, how your experience is very close to Brian's. But one of the other things that you did end up bringing up was the Toledote. So could you rehash a little bit of what the Toledotes are? Right. Because, you know, I'm slightly familiar with it, but it's not something that I'm all up on. It's just never really, like, it piqued my interest.
Well, and so I'm not a scholar. I didn't learn about it in seminary. Maybe that's where a lot of people do, but it was in reading commentaries afterwards, and I'd see this word and what does it mean and all. But I did prepare on this passage, and I've known about the idea for a while. But so Toledote is translated Genesis. That's where we get the name. So the book of Genesis is the book of Toledotes. From a Hebrew perspective, you know, Hebrews have a different outline of the Bible than we do, and they look at it slightly different. And so, but if you want to put on your Hebrew thinking cap, so to speak, this is the book of the Toledotes, the generations, and it means generations. It doesn't mean beginnings. I know Genesis now has this meaning of beginnings, but that family generation is what comes to play in it. And as you look at these generations, you see that the heavens and the earth are said to have generations. That's the Toledote from chapter 2, verse 4 to the end of chapter 4. And but then the rest of them are the generations of Adam and Noah and so on. And it's tracing a very specific line all the way through Genesis that basically ends with Jacob. And as it relates to families, you know, the translation of the scriptures that you use, the Christian Standard Bible.
Christian Standard. Yep.
It says family records, which isn't bad at all. It's getting the idea across really well. And it's interesting that it ends with Jacob. And I mention that for a couple reasons. One is Jacob's name is changed to Israel. Jacob is like, if from Noah to Abraham, history's going vroom. And from Abraham to Jacob, it's going vroom. And
it slows down.
And you get to Jacob's kids and you start walking. And it walks you through Jacob's dysfunctional life. Mother loved him, father loved his brother, his dysfunctional family, which wife he loves, which child he loves, you know, the children's anger, and how that works out, so that at the end of the book, you know, you've got more than 10 chapters on that last family, and it's pointing in a particular direction. Now Joseph wasn't in the line of Christ. That was Judah. First wife, by the way. Polygamy was not necessary. Just saying. If he by faith said, well, this is God's will, whether I like it or not, whether I was deceived or not. But anyway, it's going that way, and it slows down. So Genesis really does care about the family, and it points out, again, that the family line to Christ is messed up. And Jacob, who is known as Israel, is like the poster child for the most dysfunctional, and it came from it, raised it, kids lived it out after him, and yet God's people are called after his name.
Yeah.
And I think that's significant. I think that tells us something about the heart of God. I was talking with my wife this morning, and we were one of the things she said from her devotions was that sometimes you'll hear people talk about the God of the Old Testament as this angry God, and the God of the New Testament is love, and she was saying, but Jesus says, Jesus said, he who has seen me has seen the Father. And one way we see that is look how he loves Jacob or Israel, and how that nation just really never gets better.
Yeah, and that's something that I run into all the time with my work, is the difference between God in the Old Testament and God in the New Testament, and is God really different? And honestly, no. to mimic the book that you read, discussion questions. It's like it's a very simple no, but we're getting to. I would say that we're seeing different attributes. Being displayed. Right. That it's two different sides. I wouldn't say it's not two different gods, but it's two different sides of God. If we're going to maybe use that language, where we get to see the wrath of God kind of being poured out pretty frequently in the Old Testament, but in the New Testament, all of the wrath is being funneled into the person of Jesus rather than all of humanity. And I think it was just kind of a buildup until that point. And we see God like doing all of these things, like with these specific lines. It's like taking messed up people, and he's going to do something great with them. And that's to produce. And
that's the story of the Old Testament.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's something that I think a lot of people that are, looking at it from outside the Christian perspective, and there's a lot of people that are doing that. Not saying that they're wrong for looking at it that way, but there is something different about looking at it from having a purposed way and reason for writing, and building up until the culmination in with the incarnation, than just focusing on the Old Testament only, and only on a very particular aspect of God, an attribute of God, rather than seeing the bigger picture.
And actually, if you do read Jesus, you find he speaks about hell and wrath more than anyone else. And it's just it's so much easier to see mercy and grace because it fell on Christ for God's people. And the focus is not in the Gospels on the wrath to come, but it's all over
it's
there.
It's there. Yeah. And that you brought up a really good point, that the Bible is very purposed in its target. It's not just a random recording of history like we do now. We like to record everything.
My truth in history.
So yes, there is. They are recording just kind of the things that are happening, and that's the descriptive part of the histories and the different aspects of, actually even descriptive is even in the poetry and the apocalyptic and all of that stuff. They're describing what's going to happen, what is happening at the current time of being written. But then there's this prescriptive line that runs through the entire Bible, and it's a very purposed line. And I think that's, again, something that people tend to miss, is that they think, because we mentioned multiple times here in the podcast, and Raphael mentioned it a little bit as well in the sermons, but there's regardless of where you stand on the Genesis debate, whether it's old Earth, young Earth, theistic evolution, wherever you stand on there, there's a very specific line here that's being drawn, and it's that question is a fringe question. It's not necessarily how did God create, it's what did God
yeah.
create?
That's
who,
right.
And who did God create?
Yeah.
And who created?
Yeah.
So that's really what we're getting to. But even then, we're leading up until Jesus. So that's something that people tend to miss.
Yeah.
And because they get stuck in the young Earth versus old Earth debate, which is a fun debate, but it should just stay there. It should just stay fun, and we need to focus on the major on the majors and minor on the minors.
Right.
So, yeah, that was just one of the other things. So, something else that you bring up is, and you've already mentioned it, God working through the family.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you talk with someone who, in our current cultural context, we have organizations that are basically set out to destroy the nuclear family?
Yeah.
So for those of you that don't know, the nuclear family is like a husband and wife that are married and that they have kids, and that they stay together the entire time that their kids are alive, and they're in their entire lives. They stay married, and they become a nucleus for culture, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you talk to someone through that type of topic?
Yeah. I think depending on who it is and where we're going with it, I'd probably start by trying to build bridges. That I am very much for the nuclear family as you described it, a mom, a dad, married for life, raising children, and for this cause their children get married and so on and so forth. But I would say the scriptures are well aware of a fallen world, and so you have the story of Ruth coming back to Bethlehem with her mother-in-law Naomi, and their family's broken by death, and yet they're still a family. And I think that I think Jesus, being single, still had a family. So I would want to first say, there's more than just a mom and a dad and children, and we have to live in this world, and we can see that. We can see the scriptures accommodating that, and even in the scriptures where you have the nuclear family, you still have clans and uncles and aunts and uncles and cousins and all that sort of thing. I think talking about that, I would then go back to just say, look, Jesus indicates this is God's design. He indicates that in Matthew 19, where he talks against divorce and speaks about that, which it's kind of interesting. I read that chapter this morning in my personal devotions. And the very next story is the children coming to Jesus and him saying, let the little children come unto me. And then the rich young ruler. And the story out of the rich young ruler is how hard it is for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven. I'd love to talk about the kingdom and the kingdom of heaven when we get there. But they talk about that. Who can be saved? Well, it's impossible, except nothing's impossible for God. And that's okay. And then Peter's like, well, what about us? We've left everything. What's in it for us? And Jesus says, no one who's left mother, father, sister, brother, kind of family, and other things for me and the sake of the kingdom will not get 100-fold more back. He's saying 100-fold more family back, fathers, mothers, sisters, brothers, and I think he's talking about the family of God. So I would think about that, and then I would also think about just again, I'm not a scholar. I did go to school, did get my degree, but I'm a pastor, and I love the scriptures. But I understand that the research is out there that shows that children do best in a nuclear family. And I think it's worth Christians holding to. This is what's best for society. And if it's true that this is verifiable and evidence shows that, then why wouldn't we want to encourage our culture, our society? Here's where we're influencing, the Christian influence into the world would be, let's seek what's best. Let's seek first what's best for people.
Yeah, I actually watched a debate on that topic, whether Christianity was good for society or not. And the overwhelming evidence from the sociological studies is that it is.
Yeah.
You're going to have your outliers that are, and they're going to be all skewed and flawed and things like that. But even then, the overwhelming evidence shows that Christianity, by and large, when practiced and understood rightly, is the best for society. And we've produced the most things. Without Christianity, we wouldn't have science. We wouldn't have hospitals or universities. Yeah. Christians were the first people to start out creating a university. Yeah. So higher education and all of the scientists that are like, they have their PhDs and they're doing all of this fascinating research. They wouldn't be there without Christians.
Right.
And I don't think that there's enough people out there giving credit where credit's due. And I think society suffers for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think too that moves us towards the culture of the kingdom. Because I don't think it was smart Christians who came up with the scientific method of inquiry or medicine and so on and so forth. They were smart. I don't want to take away intelligence. It's a gift of God, and I imagine something connected to our being made in His image.
Yep.
But I want to say it was lived out in the culture of the kingdom. It was following Jesus to live according to the principles that He laid out.
Yeah.
And John Stott, used to be a famous guy, wrote a book, a commentary on the Sermon on the Mount called The Counterculture. And if you look at the Sermon on the Mount, it's about the kingdom, entering the kingdom. It's at chiastic. It's at the beginning, at the end. Or at
There's
least,
the chiasm.
Or at least an inclusio, if you like those big words.
I love them.
Yeah, but it's about the kingdom and entrance into the kingdom of heaven. And in fact, this morning I looked at that, and when you think about how Jesus speaks about salvation, it's entering the kingdom. It was that way with the rich young ruler, how hard it is for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. And his disciples understand, well, who can be saved? It's salvation he's talking about. It's that way in the Sermon on the Mount. And you can do a little word search on kingdom and let's see, what was it? I can't remember the two words I pulled out. Enter, entering, enters, and kingdom. And there's Jesus, like 10 times over. Oh, wow. Even you remember Nicodemus, right? Coming at night and speaking to Jesus, and Jesus says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, unless a man is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God or kingdom of heaven." And then he repeats it. "Truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born of the water and the Spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of heaven."
Yeah.
And the apostles would talk about being delivered from the domain of darkness and transferred into the kingdom of His beloved Son. And Hebrews would say, "Therefore, since we receive a kingdom which cannot be shaken." And so that picture runs throughout scriptures, and we are called sons and daughters, citizens, soldiers, and servants.
Yeah, and that's one of the great things that I mentioned before, I think philosophically. So that's a perfect entrance for just thinking about the kingdom philosophically rather than just the here and now. That is very prominent within the progressive Christian movement, where they're trying to usher in the kingdom physically. So that's where I think when we look at the kingdom, not just as a physical thing that's coming, which I don't think that their intentions are bad, that we should be working towards building a better society that is God-honoring and Christ-affirming and all of those things. How they're going about it might be is very wrong. But if we look at it not just physically but metaphysically and seeing that the kingdom of God is also a metaphysical kingdom, that there's this kingdom that can't be shaken because it's grounded. It is the very foundation of reality. So if we do look at it that way, that's the reason why it can't be shaken, is because you can't shake a truth.
Yeah.
Like, truth is truth regardless of whether you believe it or not.
Right.
So if the kingdom of God is true, if God exists, if all of the different apologetic arguments build up, then the kingdom of God also can't be shaken, because it is just a truth of the world that we live in.
Yes. And I don't keep up with all the modern debates and all that sort of stuff. I used in the message influence, I think. The world is influencing us, and we need to be an influence on the world. And I think the Christian life can be categorized, like we can think about sanctification is learning to live as citizens, sons, soldiers of the kingdom of heaven. And by that I don't mean something partisan or political in that way. I just mean following Jesus. I referred in the message to Matthew 18, and I wish I would have developed that more, because it gives what I'm talking about. Jesus, when he puts that little child in front of him and says, unless you're converted and like this child, you will not enter the kingdom. Harsh words for the disciples. And it's because he doesn't like the pride behind who's the greatest in the kingdom. He calls for this humility, which is a huge value to the triune God and the kingdom. And it's like his first lesson there. And it's this humble living that maybe is why Christianity isn't known for all the good things it's done. Those are usually, when they're done right and well, it's usually with a humble heart, the way it ought to be. But Jesus plays it out. And, he says, this is such a high priority that if you make one of these little ones to stumble, it'd be better for you to have a millstone tied around your neck and thrown into the sea. And it's not the will of my Father, he says, in heaven, there's that kingdom again, that one of these little ones should perish. And that heart is to be our heart. We're supposed to care. And I think that's huge for parenting. I think that loving your spouse, loving your church, raising the next generation, whether you're using VBS or some other program to reach kids, it's how we, with a humble heart, reflect something true of the culture that our Father is calling us to.
Yeah, and you brought up culture and the influences and everything, and how Cain's culture ended up becoming the dominant culture of the time, and then Seth's culture was kind of more of like the subculture, where subculture usually is some sort of deviant from the broader culture, which would be Cain's. And Cain's line, they're the ones that are doing all of the culture formation and doing all of this, like, polygamy ends up being like good and okay, or at least permissible. Maybe. Oh no,
I'd say good. There's culture still practicing it as a good thing. So.
Yeah, and so now, at least in the American West, we don't necessarily call it polygamy anymore, because it already has this negative connotation to it. Now we call it polyamory. That's literally, they're basically the same thing happening. There might not be a marriage connection there, because it's illegal. You just can't do it. But there is that there's that same type of mentality where you can be physically intimate and in a relationship, in a marriage-like relationship with more than one person.
Love is love.
Love is love. Yeah. So you have that's being the dominant culture currently and from Cain until now. And then we have Seth's subculture. And what's crazy is I think we've seen the ebb and flow of Christian culture coming, like Christianity flourishing in culture every so often with throughout history, and then it fades into the background, and then it flourishes again, and then it fades. And with just looking broader at culture is almost like we're in a bloom again,
Mm-hmm.
where we're seeing so many celebrities like coming out with, hey, yeah, I'm a Christian, that's why I don't do this.
Mm-hmm.
Or we see all of these people coming to a more traditional type of church tradition, where that's where we're seeing a lot more people converting to Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy. And regardless of what our like issues with them are, I'm like, listen, you're going to church, you're learning about Jesus, you are grasping and holding on to the pillars of the faith. I'm cool with that. It's like you're trying to figure this thing out. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But then that's where we're seeing this subculture kind of flourish again, and hopefully what my hope and prayer is that culturally this ends up becoming another, what we're looking at in the next maybe 10 to 15, maybe 50 years, is that the Christianity subculture now becomes the dominant. I'm hoping. I don't know if this is pure conjecture. I'm just observing culture right now, and we're seeing all of these younger people that are enthralled, like we saw with the Asbury Seminary revival. Again, regardless of what your theological differences are there, it's like that's a really amazing thing. We saw that with the Great Awakenings, had some great impacts for Christianity in terms of the Americas and the British Isles. And without those, we wouldn't. It just, things would be totally different.
So I think about the parable Jesus told. The kingdom is like a mustard seed, which is very small, but planted, it becomes a tree and flourishes. Or like yeast that leavens the whole lump. It has this growth mentality. And I think if you like look at history, whether 2,000 years or 4,000 years or something like that, you will see that what Jesus said is true. Like there's billions, a billion or plus, I don't know what the numbers are, of Christians. Sure right, but Christianity, I've heard it described as the only global religion. Like Islam is still a Middle Eastern kind of thing. I know it's here and it's growing globally, but it's Middle Eastern in its impact, and Hinduism is, from the continent of India or South Asia, and it's all over, but that's because of the moving around. It's still kind of a Indian thing, and you can go through that. But there's Asians that are Christian and generationally so, and India too, for that matter, and throughout Africa and the whole global South and such. So the church is expanding, and it flourishes in one place and declines in another. But overall, I think if you were to just take a freeze frame, whether today, last 10 years, 20 years, or whatever, and look at it compared to 1,000 years, you would see that Christianity has flourished, and what you said earlier, it has brought flourishing as far as science and health and education and these sorts of things. And if you trace it out, just 100 years ago, we didn't have penicillin, and life expectancy was very short. We didn't have globalization to where we had the availability of so many things, not to mention
the
the
different
internet.
commerce type
I've heard it said like GDP, the world's GDP was kind of like flat until the last 50, 100 years, and it's straight line up. Like the amount of wealth, the amount of comfort. We live like kings. Kings didn't have air conditioning, and
I don't
they
know
had
how
a
they
form
did
of
it.
indoor plumbing, but we have it good.
Yeah.
Well, okay, even if without air conditioning, you still have probably a refrigerator and a freezer and indoor plumbing.
We might live in that refrigerator until we're in the middle. We're going to hit a heat wave in the next few days, so it's like, I might be living in my fridge. But I don't know how they survived without AC.
Those thick castle walls.
And that's really, really interesting to think about. Like all of that stuff. And case in point, one of the with my training at Biola, we kind of tacitly become experts, or somewhat of an expert, in the Kalam cosmological argument, which is everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe has a beginning, therefore the universe had a cause. So it took me a little bit longer than I admit to memorize that. I think William Lane Craig would be kind of disappointed. But that argument for the existence of God is Islamic in its origin, because they were on our side in that aspect. They wanted to prove God's existence through various means, and at a certain point they stopped. And that is, from my understanding of how the history has kind of played out, is because science ended up contradicting Islam. So they stopped progress in science because they were rightly holding their religion above science and all of those things, and I think that's a good thing. But they were afraid of progress because there was a contradiction there, where Christianity is like, we see no contradiction, let's keep going. And I think that's the wonderful thing about Christianity as opposed to Islam and Mormonism, and maybe Buddhism and Hinduism, all of the other world religions. They end up sort of stopping at a certain point, where Christianity is like, nope, press on. Let's keep going, because that is exactly what God did with us. Is, yes, we hit a roadblock. We might have hit a roadblock, but that doesn't mean it's not passable. That we can't overcome this roadblock, and that is where we rely on God. He brings us over, and then we move forward. So it would be interesting to see then, given the spread of Christianity. Obviously, it hubbed in the Middle East, in Israel, and in that little section of the kind of like Arabian Peninsula, and see, okay, it's going to spread from there. But I would be curious if we were to time lapse it, if it would spread and then all of a sudden everything would just start going by itself, rather than seeing like a line go from Israel out to all of these other countries continuously.
Yeah. My understanding of the history is because of the Jewish diaspora. Jews were already kind of everywhere. Yeah. And then, of course, with the Roman road system, everything was set for Christianity, for the Apostle Paul.
It was a ticking time bomb for the explosion of
it. And as believers, we say, well, God's providence is seen in all that. And, one of my favorite verses is Galatians 4:4. Okay. At the fullness of time, at the right time, God sent his son, born of a woman. And I'm sure that fullness of time had to do with all the promises, and far greater than Roman roads and a common language that
I'd say it included them.
but it's not without those things. Those things were there too, and the spread of Christianity, maybe more like a mushroom. I couldn't prove it, but one of my Indian friends long ago told me, when I asked him when did he become a Christian, I was like, I come from a Christian family through all these generations, and we trace Christianity through Thomas coming to our country, doubting Thomas, the Apostle Thomas. So we know about Paul because Luke wrote about him and he wrote his letters. But these other guys, which we don't know a lot about, they may have stayed in Jerusalem for a long time, but some of them spread out.
I've heard of that. I haven't done much reading or research into Thomas going to India or not. So I'm gonna bank on your Indian friend there for the
that's right.
I
can't prove it. Maybe I'm just putting out a false rumor, but
if he hears it, he'll correct you. So, do you have any closing remarks as we start to wind this down? Is there anything that you would just like to kind of give the church as a closing remark on this passage? Maybe even just like reiterate your final point or something like that.
I think it's important to see this even in the bigger history. Like, I only brought the context out to the Toledot and to the Toledots.
Mm-hmm.
But if we went Genesis to Revelation and traced that out, creation, recreation, so to speak, with the fall, we had spiritual warfare, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was a spiritual warfare, there was a false gospel and all that. Well, we read at the end of Revelation about the serpent being Satan and the devil and all being thrown into a lake of fire. So no more spiritual warfare, no more temptation. Heaven will be a place where marriage and family is fulfilled. And I want to be careful there. Jesus said we will not be given in marriage and such, but will be like the angels. And and heaven's a better place. So if if you're like, I want to love my husband and wife there, whatever, it's like, it'll be better, whatever it is. But that family picture is still there. And the union we have with the Father and the Son and the Spirit moving us to say, Abba. I think being able to see the conclusion that we're still in the spiritual battle that started in this first Toledot. Marriage is under attack. The family is under attack. But when it's all said and done, Christ has already accomplished redemption. He's already making us perfect. He's the author and the perfecter of faith. I would want to close by saying we have great confidence that God will. God has not lost anything. He will bring it to conclusion, and we will live our best life as we live by faith. And I mean trusting God moment by moment throughout each day.
Yeah, that is very, very good. And I just want to remind you all that are watching or listening that this conversation is not a replacement for Mark's sermon. Not a replacement at all. It's a supplement. It's something that is meant to give you more context for the sermon, or maybe dive a little bit deeper. It's something to boost you in your faith, and it's also not a replacement for being in church on a Sunday morning. There's where you're going to experience the family. Is at the church. It's a messy thing. Church is a messy place. Families are messy, as we saw here in this passage, but that doesn't mean that we can't work together for the purpose of God. So if you're struggling to find a church, please, you can let us know here at City Church. All of the staff, we have our emails that are up on the website. All of the elders also have an email that you can get a hold of them. So if you're struggling to find a good, healthy church, please let us know. We will do what we can to find you one. We have a ton of churches that we network with. So, Mark, thank you again for your sermon, for the conversation. It was a lot of fun, and thank you for sharing your story.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
It's been a joy and privilege to attend, but to be invited into the pulpit and into the studio. I've enjoyed it too. It's been fun.
Good. Thank you. And we will see you all next week. God bless.